Hello, I'm Tia Ramey. Welcome to my YouTube channel where I give communication tips and strategies to leaders to help them both personally and professionally. Tonight, I just wanted to give you a little bit of a tip to talk to you about insecurity and the impact that it has on our relationships. I mean, of course, not only does it have a great impact on our relationships, our insecurities have a huge impact on the way we communicate with one another. When we are insecure, usually what it means is that there's some sort of truth about ourselves that we're very uncomfortable with. And sometimes we're afraid that people see it, or sometimes we're afraid that people don't see some things. And we can become insecure, and sometimes we overcompensate in our processes of trying to protect ourselves from people touching those areas of our lives where we are mostly vulnerable. And so, what I want to talk to you about is how do we get around this? How do we recognize that there's a problem with insecurity and how it's guiding our communication? And first, I do want to say that insecurity impacts our listening. And it impacts our listening in the worst way. Sometimes you hear things that are really not being said. Sometimes you're hearing through your insecurities and you're hearing through your fears versus hearing the intention of the other person who is intending to communicate with you. This can be a really big problem. I'll say if you're not really listening and listening with the intent of the person who's talking to you in mind, but you're listening with the intention of protecting yourself from being vulnerable, then you're going to miss opportunities to forge true, genuine connections. And that's a sad thing to endure, because sometimes we're afraid that people see those insecurities that we have and we think that they're poking at it. And really, the people who are closest to you are going to be the people who can take that from you, right? They're going to be the people who can see you, who can understand you, see those areas where you are vulnerable and love you through that. But if we're constantly trying to protect ourselves from it and we're guiding people from getting there, often we can create these blockages and we can create these walls in that process that keeps people out. And there's a big difference between having boundaries and having walls. You know, having boundaries is just saying that, hey, look, this is a line that I've established, and I want you to understand what the lines are. You can come into this line when you were invited, versus like a boundary. That is a boundary, but a wall is where you are literally keeping people out, but you likewise keep yourself locked in. And there's no one that's really able to cross that line. So make sure that you are not listening through your insecurities. Give people a chance before you react. I like to say, make sure you're responsive and not reactive. But before you react, ask. If you're not sure what a person meant by that, ask. Sometimes you can ask what their intentions were behind what they're saying or what the goal is in the dialogue. Make sure that you ask that, because there can be times where people are passive aggressive and they're triggering at your insecurities, but I think it's always great to ask before you say what's next. The next things, of course, is going to impact your response, right? So if it's impacting your listening, the way you respond is going to be huge at that point. And you want to make sure that you don't look like a person that is, just too aggressive or too fearful. Sometimes we think that when we're lashing out in anger, it's because we look strong. Really, for most people, they think that you look very weak or emotionally unstable or erratic if you're not able to respond in a way that really is disciplined, in a way that is thoughtful, in a way that is honest or genuine. You don't want to respond in a way that protects your insecurities. You want to respond in a way that helps you to have a successful connection. And that means taking the time to understand the person that's talking to you. Again, understanding their intention is very important. It's not the only thing that's important, because sometimes, unfortunately, our intent and our execution can be two different things. But remember, most people are not very thoughtful. Most of the time, people do have good intentions. They just may not know how to connect with you. And as I say all the time, a lot of us are speaking a different language altogether. And so you're hearing them through your language and the way that you process words, and that may be totally different in their world of the way they process words. So think through that. I mean, we're seeing some of that now with our expanding diversity initiatives. We are finding quite a bit that people are processing words differently, and they have different meanings to words. Words like man and woman, for example. So you can't assume that a word means the same to you that it does to someone else. we're kind of going through this space right now where we're trying to figure out whether or not we can impose our definitions on one another. And I think, in my opinion, right now, it is best that we treat it as language and understand that we do not have the same definitions of those words, and maybe not treating it like the difference between right and wrong, but treating it like the difference between Spanish and French for now until the dust settles. This helps us to understand one another, and we can't really impose our definitions on one another, but we can try our best to understand our intent. And if someone misinterprets a word that you say, ask. And then sometimes you can also ask for consent to make that correction as well. And that's really important to make sure that you are responsive in that way and not reactive. The next thing it does is it causes us to be so overly defensive, with insecurity. And it's an unattractive feature when, like, for example, because my YouTube channel is for leaders, if you are defensive and someone is correcting you and all you have is a defense, it comes off as an excuse constantly. It's so important that leaders know how to own, their stuff, like really own it and take responsibility for it. Be willing to take it in, be willing to listen and hear what people have to say before you begin to defend why you made the decisions and the choices that you made. And it's good in terms of, there's times where defense is important, but it's great to ask for consent to defend. Hey, is this a good time for me to explain why I made this decision? That's a way that you can pivot instead of just instantly coming off with having some sort of reason for why you did something that didn't work very well, especially if the impact was negative. That is something to truly keep in mind, is a lot of times when people are talking to you, they're not speaking to you from the initial standpoint of your intent, but they're trying to let you know that the impact of the choice you made didn't fall well or land well with others. So that's not a good point to be defensive. That's a good point to listen, fully take it in what people have to say and how your decisions impacted them. After you've listened, then you've earned the right to maybe sort of explain and not defend some of your choices. There are times where it is important to defend your choices, but make sure you're not doing it because you're insecure. Do it because it is necessary. And sometimes insecurity keeps us from understanding when it is necessary to have a defense and when it's necessary not to. So understanding that insecurity also causes us to make some assumptions, wrong assumptions all the time. That's one of the high points of insecurity, is that people tend to assume a lot. And again, this goes back to the beginning when I talked about insecurity impacting listening. You have to ask questions. If you're not sure, don't assume. A matter of fact, you should assume that you don't know enough. If you want to get to know people, you want to forge true, genuine connections, if you want to earn the right to lead someone, do not make assumptions. Don't assume that people are trying your authority. Don't assume that people are trying to make you look bad. Don't assume that if someone is trying to correct you, that they're trying to take your job or take you down. Do not make assumptions. You cannot let insecurity guide your communication, which means you have to take inventory of how you're feeling first. Sometimes you have to take a big pause, recognize if there is an insecurity that is there that's being triggered, recognize it before you react or respond. Sometimes that means that you need to find some wise counsel. There is safety among counsel where they can advise you on the situation. So even if it's after a meeting, sometimes ask around and see, hey, this didn't come off very well to me, or what were your thoughts about the interaction that me and this employee had during the meeting? Ask, find advisors, have people to help you, which means you've got to be very honest with yourself, truly honest with yourself about what your insecurities are, so that way you know when to bring someone into that fold to say that, hey, in this area I'm insecure, so I may not have the proper assessment to analyze what to do with this situation or how to react or respond to it. The hardest thing about insecurity, and the thing that it costs us, is that we don't often know how to discern friends from enemies, or I like to call them communication allies versus communication enemies. Sometimes what we do when we have an insecurity is we create allies with people who compliment us and make us feel good. And then we create enemies out of people who don't make us feel good, when maybe those people are friends and they're really trying to coach you, or they're trying to help you do better, or they're trying to find a way that they can help or be a part of the process. Instead, we think that they're enemies because we think they're trying to take our job, or they're trying to make us look bad. And that is a really big problem. So you have to understand the areas where you are insecure. Maybe if you are insecure about your role in the company, you're insecure about your job, you're insecure about competitors that want to take you down, have trusted advisors. people who care about you. Maybe those people are not in the office. Maybe those people are outside of the office. Sometimes even having a mental health therapist, someone that can help you out as you are trying to learn how to navigate these things, that you can run some of these situations by, is a big help. So what I'm saying is, do the work. Insecurity truly impacts your communication in a major way, and it keeps you distant from people who care about you. It keeps you from forging true, genuine connections. Unfortunately, it doesn't end well. So if you're a person who is very focused on protecting your insecurities, that's some personal work that you need to do, and you'll be a much better leader if you go down that road and decide to find comfort in those truths. You don't need to measure yourself as good or bad. You don't need to be afraid that people see the things about you that you don't want to see. Actually, I think it's quite liberating when people can see those areas of your life, and you can own that and feel good about yourself. It doesn't have to be measured. It doesn't have to be weighed. You can fully accept all that you are. So that way you don't have to be insecure. So that's why I say do the work. It's very liberating for you as a leader to be able to do those things. But I really hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast and you found it to be helpful. I hope that you will subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can also go to my website to purchase my book, Canceled. It's at tiaramey.com. My book has all of these communication tips and strategies and more, and it helps you to really understand how to have effective communication with people in a way that gives you the right to be able to change your life just one conversation at a time. So it is for leaders. It's just for you. Visit my website. Thank you so much again for subscribing to my YouTube channel. I really appreciate that you spent time with me. And if you like what you watch, make sure that you join into the next broadcast. Anyhow, thank you and have a good night.